7th graders. Today we're going to go ahead and we're going to start talking about a new literary element. But before we start, I want to know if you've, and this might be a little inappropriate, but have you ever heard a yo mama joke before? Think in your head. Have you ever heard a yo mama joke? Or have you ever turned to one of your friends and said, "Oh my goodness, I'm starving"? Well, if you've ever heard or said any one of those things, then you've heard of something that we're going to talk about today called a hyperbole. Now, a hyperbole is a form of a literary technique. But then remember, under our big bubble of literary technique, we have things called figurative language. And under figurative language is something called a hyperbole. And a hyperbole is the use of exaggeration in literature. Authors use this to add interest to their stories, to add interest to their poems, and to really make a point about how hard something was or how heavy something was, to make things exaggerated. Now, it's important to remember that hyperbole is figurative. So when we're thinking about it, it is not literal, okay? We cannot take this literally. So let's go ahead. I want to give you a couple of examples. So, first example, this bag weighs a ton. Have you ever carried a really, really heavy backpack? Because I'm sure you have. And did you ever say, "Oh, my bag weighs a ton"? Well, it might have felt like that, but did the bag literally weigh a ton? Probably not. It probably weighed, 20, 30, maybe 40 pounds at the most. So I'm going to also show you a non-example. If this bag weighs a ton is an example of a hyperbole, let's look at a non-example. This bag weighs a lot. Now think in your head, why is this not an example of a hyperbole? It's saying kind of the same thing as this bag weighs a ton, but this is not exaggerating anything. By saying a lot, we don't know that anything's being exaggerated or taken to an extreme. So let's look at another one. My car is 1,000,000 years old. I don't know if you have a car. Most 7th graders I know don't have a car, but my car is 1,000,000 years old is obviously an exaggeration. I know that cars did not exist 1,000,000 years ago, so there's no way that a car could be 1,000,000 years old. So the non-example could be something like, my car is so old. Again, we're not exaggerating anything, so this is a non-example of a hyperbole. There has to be something that is just over the top that makes it a hyperbole. Let's go ahead, and I want us to look in our book, Watson's Go to Birmingham, because this book has great use of hyperbole in it. In this book, our main character, Kenny, he's our narrator. He's 10 years old, and this is the perfect age that kids use hyperboles all the time in their speech. So listen to the very first 2 paragraphs of the Watson's Go to Birmingham. And what I want you to do is to tally. Tally how many hyperboles you hear just in these 2 paragraphs. It was one of those super duper cold Saturdays. One of those days that when you breathed out, your breath kind of hung frozen in the air, like a hunk of smoke you could walk along and look exactly like a train blowing out big, fat, white puffs of smoke. It was so cold that if you were stupid enough to go outside, your eyes would automatically blink 1,000 times all by themselves, probably so the juice inside of them wouldn't freeze up. It was so cold that if you spit, the slab would be an ice cube before it hit the ground. It was about 1,000,000,000 degrees below zero. How many tallies did you get? How many tallies? You had at least 4. You're right on. There were at least 4 hyperboles just in that paragraph alone. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to tell the difference between a hyperbole and a simile because sometimes they go hand in hand, but that's for another lesson. So remember, a hyperbole is an extreme exaggeration. So now we're going to go ahead, we're going to have a little quiz. What I want you to do is we're going to read through this paragraph and we're going to see how many hyperboles we can find. And your job is that after you find them, I'm going to show you the answers and I want you to see if you're right. If you're right, you're ready to move on to the next lesson. If not, we're going to have to review things a couple of times. So, ready? One day, I was in English class, and Mrs. Ling was so boring, I thought I might die. Suddenly, she yelled, "Are you listening?" so loud, I about had a heart attack. I did start listening so Mrs. Ling wouldn't go insane again. All right, I'm going to give you a second. You have all your hyperboles down? Is this what you had? I thought I might die? That's definitely a hyperbole, right? No one can ever be so boring you're probably going to die. And then yelling so loud that you about had a heart attack. Most 7th graders probably aren't in a position that if something surprises them that they'll actually have a heart attack. And lastly, this is something that we use a lot in speech, go insane again. Now for being literal, going insane is like a medical thing, right? So Mrs. Lamb is really not going insane here. It's not literal. So again, if you got all 3 of these right, you're ready to move on to the next lesson. If not, you're going to stick around again and we're going to review some things. Make sure you got hyperbole before we go on.